Good afternoon, a little bit late. I will try to keep my pace crisp and not take the 30 minutes necessary that have been allocated. At the end, I'll ask if there are questions. So as I go through, if things strike you, please know that there'll be a couple of minutes to ask questions. It's a little intimidating for me to stand here because the diversity of industry out there with you folks makes the topic difficult. What I've experienced in the 30 years, 28 years in the apparel industry, 2 years working in cryptographics as I tried to escape the apparel industry, which clearly didn't work because here I am back in the apparel industry. But in that 30 years, much of my content here is going to talk about what that experience is. I'm going to talk about complexity, and that's from the vantage point of an apparel company operating on a global basis. So with a lot of respect, I guess I just want to communicate that I know your worlds are very different, and what might seem complex to me might seem like a layup to you. But here we go. So in my world. Carter's is a $3.5 billion entity, 150 years old. We make baby products, clothing for kids. We operate with 3 brands, Carter's, Oshkosh, and recently acquired a kids' toy and hard goods company called Skip Hop, based in New York City. It's a diverse business. We operate in every channel, wholesale, our owned brick and mortar retail, our e-com business, which is the largest kids' clothing destination in the United States, international business, and then over the years we've developed a number of exclusive labels for large-scale partners like Walmart, Target, and recently Amazon, because they want exclusivity. They don't want the ability to have mom compare what she's seeing at Macy's to what she might be confronted with in Walmart. Recently, we've initiated an exclusive product line for Amazon. So I would say that falls into the category of our frenemy. They are an enemy of our e-com, but they are absolutely the 800-pound gorilla. And if you don't find a way to dance with that gorilla, it'll be at your peril. My supply chain has been challenged in our first year of business with Amazon because what we initially made as our stocking inventory, we thought would have a 6-month life on Amazon's site, lasted 6 weeks. So wow, it's really exciting. We're so happy. Oh shit. I operate in a supply chain where typically, it's 90 to 120 days to get something made, so we had to exercise agility, flexibility, and get more product quick. Because the worst thing you can do at Amazon and the wonderful algorithms that drive your position in the search returns, the worst thing you can do is have a SKU go dark. Because all of the accumulated search history and prioritization that you've gotten, poof, just goes away. So you don't want that to happen. So we were having fun scrambling. The complexity is, I think, overwhelming relative to my life at Phillips Van Heusen, the largest shirt company in the world, owner of the Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein brands. Later at London Fog, which sort of doesn't exist any longer, but at a point in time when I was there, largest outerwear company in the United States. At VF Brands, the largest branded apparel company with 33 different brands, North Face, Timberland, Vans, Wrangler, Lee, brand after brand after brand. I thought all of those were complex. So Carter's, as the slide indicates, 199 factories, 13 countries, multiple distribution centers, multiple language. The number on the right is what I found particularly startling. 750 million units per year. They're all really cheap. If you start to do the math and say 750 million units, hey, you only do 3.5 billion, you get an idea of what mom's willing to pay for a onesie for her infant, because they're frankly in it for, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, and then they grow out. Good for us that they grow out. As we're perpetually sizing them up and all the rest, but 24,000 styles at the creative level, and then those styles disaggregate into colors, and then the sizes that you make, so you end up with that 300,000 units underneath it. You sort of need to keep in mind that we do this for a season, for a fall season. And then, oh, by the way, 3 months later, there's the winter season. And then there's the spring season. And then there's back to school and summer. So, you know, I am a bit envious of my friends and colleagues in fast-moving consumer goods, because I think a tube of Crest toothpaste, as an example, has a little bit longer life than 3 months. But none of my stuff does. That 24,000, that's an annual number. That 24,000 in 2016 is just different than the 24,000 that we create in 2017, and on and on and on. So we sort of flush it and start over again. It's a level of complexity that I just, frankly, as I said, had not encountered prior. And that pace of forever inventing and then producing and getting to customers, doing the fulfillment and all the rest is a drumbeat. And at any point in time, you can have 3, and at moments you have 4 seasons. So my supply chain is from the concept to the final fulfillment. I got 4 seasons we're sort of juggling. It's very, I find it to be very, very complex. A couple of different tools that we use to manage the complexity. First and foremost, remain flexible. No matter what our front-end partners come and say, no matter what that outside-in stimulus is, my job, frankly, is to say, sure, what needs to be true in order to say yes to whatever crazy request is made of my supply chain? So flexibility is paramount. Got 3 in the blue boxes, got 3 strategies that we use to remain flexible and to deal with what we are confronted with, and then, frankly, still make money in order to do it in a fashion way. So I'll dive into them a little bit. Our procurement strategy is all about, from the concept, when we start with a designer sketching on a piece of paper, we try to remain as non-committal as long as possible as the designer's going through and they're putting it on a piece of paper, and then we're sampling it and we're showing it to Kohl's and Macy's and Target and Amazon and all the rest, and they're changing it in the forever, changing process. As we run through that, we're trying to postpone every decision we can to remain as flexible as we can. Along the way, we're buying raw materials, we're buying cotton, we're buying fabric, we're having it colored up, we're printing it, we're buying trims, we're buying YKK zippers, we're buying billions and billions of snaps. We're doing all that and hoping that somehow all that noise on the demand side, as we postpone, is going to reconcile with the other side of the equation, the supply side, and we're going to line up. So this whole slide just talks about, going from the we know little to we know very definitively, where we distribute the PO. But the strategy represented in this slide is, as you're creating product, postpone every decision as long as possible to have as clear a read from your consumer as you can. So hopefully the raw materials you bought can be converted into what they want to give you money for. Very straightforward. We have this thing that, frankly, I had never encountered in my first 25 years in the apparel industry, is that Carter's does an amazingly good job of converting from that procrastinate to a moment in time when we're going to lock it down. And this is usually about halfway through the manufacturing process in Asia. At that moment, we have to reconcile all the demand, and we immediately communicate through this DIM code, which is a dimension code. It was a field available in our ERP system. You start with the style, you go to the color, you go to the size, and underneath it, like in men's tailored clothing, you might have a short or a long. We borrowed, the good folks at Carter's, borrowed the DIM code to say, I'm going to say that DIM code is for Toys R Us. So that halfway through the manufacturing process, we communicate to the factory that of the 2 million baby onesies you're making, 200,000, label it this way, price it this way, and pack it this way for Toys R Us. So we go from this massive procurement strategy and postponement on decision making to Now I need you to absolutely flip the coin and give it to me in the final form so that it goes from Asia to Long Beach to our customer, hopefully, and I never see it in my distribution center. The rest of my life and a lot of my time at VF Corp with all those wonderful brands was spent talking about how can we get out of the value-added services business in the 23 distribution centers that they operated in the United States, where we had to put Macy's hangers on, put Macy's pricing on, pack it the way Macy's wanted, do everything the way all those wonderful retailers that buy from those brands the way they want it. I joined Carter's and was introduced to the DIM code, and honestly, it was oh my God. First of all, how the hell did you convince your factories to do this? Because, we thought at VF you'd never be able to do it. Well, Carter's is overwhelmingly the largest buyer of babies' infant clothing in the world, so that market strength, and frankly, a lot of our factories grew up with us, they didn't know any better. So they're like, oh, you want us to do this? Okay, well, is our volume going up 10% next year? Yes. Okay, we'll find a way to do it. So sort of the invention of the DIM code in our ERP was pretty miraculous, and other people should take credit for it. I'm just here to tell you that it's a way that we go from postponement to final form. Literally in a week's time, we do a massive calculation in a cloud computing application that we think is God-sent because we never found an owned system that could juggle that much data in a short amount of enough time to connect all the dots and bring them in, and then spit out instructions to the factories as to what to do. We do it in the cloud because we don't have enough money to own systems and hardware to do that kind of thing. Next is the WIPP Reservation. I guess, frankly, some of my colleagues in the industry would say you want to keep your inventory as generic as possible until you know its final destination. We are blessed with having regular customers and reliable business, so literally at that same moment that we convert that product going through the production process in Asia from generic inventory. One day it's generic inventory, the next day it's destined for a customer and I want you to pack it and ship it this way, and we hard allocate to it at that moment in time. And frankly, our customers in my world really like to know with precision what day they're going to get it. I mean, Walmart has us down to a one-day start and cancel. Most of my life has been with customer orders. They gave you a window. It used to be we wanted it in the month of June, and then we want it in the second 2 weeks of June. And with Walmart, it's now I want it on this day. And people are talking about hourly slots and all the rest. Very little latitude. If you're outside those boundaries, it's a chargeback, and you start to eat into our very thin margins. We do very, very high unit counts on very low margins. That's the way we make money. Can't afford those kind of things. So again, we allocate all the way back into the manufacturing process, which again might seem a little counterintuitive to inventory flexibility, but on the demand side, thankfully, we're stable enough that we get away with this. So again, 3 strategies in order to deal with the complexity that we have. Overarching it is 2 other efforts going on. One is invest in technology, and for us, we take a very, very counter-industry point of view with regard to technology. My former employer and a lot of big companies in the apparel industry are embracing what I would describe as the mother of all ERP systems. It's a big honkin' ERP, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-doing system that if you just buy this system, it will solve all of your supply chain problems. It'll be connected in a way, a little bit like Laura said, you'll have the network of all knowledge in one system and it'll solve all your problems. I lived through multiple implementations of that tool at my former employer where you had a budget, you went into it thinking it was going to take a year and we're going to spend $50 million, and you finished at $180 million, and it was 3 years later, and at the end of it, you were massively non-flexible. I mean, it was rigid. And you go back to the software vendor and you say, hey, marketplace has changed. I need to do this now. And they're like, great, we'll put that on the roadmap for development in a coming decade or whatever it is. And oh, by the way, if you want it sooner than that, we'll charge you for it. We know there are 30 other customers asking for the same thing, and they're telling all of them, you'll have to individually charge. I get, that's their model. Just doesn't work for us. It's a level of rigidity On the return on invested capital front, not good. Rigidity, not good. Flexibility, not good. Distraction for the organization, not good. And honestly, if the companies that I have witnessed in my 30 years, if on the other side of it, they were outperforming the industry, I'd say, okay, maybe. But as Laura said, there's not a correlation there. So we're not. We believe in flexibility. We try to keep our transactional ERP system doing dumb transactions, and then we use a host of cloud computing tools at a higher level to do decision support, insight, and guide us to the right decisions. We take the decisions out of those cloud computing platforms, and we just inform the transactional systems. Do this. And they're very good at executing the do this. But again, it's a contrary point of view. We don't want, those name brand software tools trying to make decisions because they're too rigid, they're too slow, there are too many assumptions that other have baked into them that don't apply to my business. So again, we do that decision making in the cloud, and we inform the transactional systems what to do. All of that sort of leads to our model, why Carter's was a recipient in 2016 of the award. We're mostly growth-oriented, but we've got to make money on every one of those 750 million units. So operating margin, my goal, as I've said to my boss, is the supply chain from an economic standpoint is year after year after year, I need to consume less and less of the percent of sales. So, if today the supply chain costs Carter's 3.7%, next year I want to be 3.6, and then 3.5, and just walk it down. And along the way, I have to give us more and more and more capabilities that we didn't have before. That's just what I've signed up for as a supply chain practitioner. So that's our model, to aid the operating margin by walking down our expense structure and remaining flexible. Our inventory turns are quite good. As I said, the return on invested capital, when I joined Carter's, we were looking at that mother of all ERP implementation for $100 million. That's off our 5-year plan. We're going to spend that money on something that is closer to the consumer, and that mom who's buying our product can actually hopefully touch and feel and benefit from, to motivate her to buy more. Because I don't think anybody's ever bought a product because it came out of a all-knowing, all-seeing, all-doing ERP system. So anyway, appreciate you listening to me. Anybody questions?
Questions. So Peter, when I interviewed you, one of the things I loved was the fact that you weren't doing SKU-based planning, right? Mm-hmm. Most people have item at a location kind of imprinted all over all their systems. So when you talk about this evolution of the DIN number and the ability to manage complexity, you said you didn't have something to start with, so people didn't know to fall there. So how did you make that transition in terms of the evolution? Because I'm sure there's lots of consultants that come in and say you need to go do SKU-based planning, right? Or SKU-based, inventory management. How did you make that journey to really drive that?
Well, I think like a lot of what we do, invention is born out of necessity.
Yes.
Because frankly, with 24,000 separate style creatives every year, there is not yet enough intelligence, artificial or otherwise, to connect all the dots and to plan and forecast accurately enough at that level to make a difference. So you aggregate up from that, and you adopt a postponement strategy. And at the end of the day, we're just trying to get to the point where we're making product, it's a make-to-order as opposed to a make-to-forecast. Our lead times would suggest you have to make-to-forecast. Our postponement strategy allows us to go from a make-to-forecast to a make-to-order because we've delayed by 60 days that final definition of what it's going to be.
So many people have defined very efficient supply chains, right? Very much looking at, final stage, not so much postponement. How have you built agility into your metrics and what you reward? How have you been able to maintain that?
Well, again, I think it's mostly, I'm not sure we actually reward it other than we have a culture that expects it.
Okay.
Because as you had said in your presentation, Wall Street responds to growth. and they reward growth with share price. And so that motivation and that culture within our company, it is really an organization that believes in you're not allowed to come to the table and say no. At the most, you can answer the question, what needs to be true in order for X to happen? So I think that's mostly cultural. And one of the slides there talked about the fact that in the supply chain, we've got a very robust program of rotating people through all the different aspects of the supply chain so that our decision makers are diverse enough in their experiences. When the guy running the distribution center or the gal running procurement and all the rest says, I need to do this, well, they've probably at a point in their career, they've worked there, they've walked in their shoes, they have an appreciation, they might try to offer a suggestion as to how to solve the riddle, but they're good partners in meeting the need to be flexible, because it's survival.
But I think it's a wonderful story. How many of you have designed for complexity, embrace postponement, focus on growth? What questions do you have for Peter? We're caught up on time. Sam and Ann, if we can run some mics, raise your hand. Because, apparel has so many variations, and you make the cutest clothes, so, I'm all over it as a grandmother. How do we get there with complexity and agility? Joe, you had a question for Peter? And Peter's not going to be here for, I think, the balance of the conference, so I want to be sure that you can get into his wisdom, because I just really think this is a great case study on complexity.
Question is, do you have a formal SNOP process? If so, could you give us a few headlines, bullet points on how that works in Carter?
Well, we do. So whether it's the typical process of pre-meetings in order to get to the table between sales and operations, we run an SNOP. Again, because of the methodology at which we choose to manufacture, we have a lot less variation in those meetings than in other places where I've been, where inventory is more open and more, I guess, fungible as to the end use. In our model, we're happy to lock it in during the manufacturing process, so you don't have a lot of discrepancy between what sales needs are, because they were defined earlier on. Our customer, their demand profile is stable enough, and then given in the very, very large unit volumes that we go through, my supply chain is responsible for any excess inventory that might be generated as the result of that SNOP process. If something falls out in that, thankfully for us, it's small enough that in 750 million units a year and 800 of our own stores, we make it go away. We run the process. I would not say it's as central or critical to our existence, just because our model is a little bit different.
Time for another question. Yes, here. Hi. Welcome, Rod. How are you?
Hello, Laura. Thank you, Peter. Just a question. You have been speaking a lot about all what you have been transforming, delaying the maximum delayed differentiation. Can you also talk to us about people, skills, competencies that you have developed at the same time, or what are, I would say, the trend that you foresee?
Well, as mentioned before, I guess if I look back on sort of what got me here, I would tell you that my own career was not strategically planned and mapped out, and every job that I took was part of an overarching strategy. Just not the case, okay? I'm here at the point where if we're talking about operating a distribution center or bringing containers across the port at Long Beach, or sitting with a factory owner somewhere in Asia, or working with somebody in design about product development, 3D CAD work, or the digitization of the concepting end of the business. I've done all those jobs. So typically when I'm at the table with someone, I can speak their language enough and what their challenges enough are. I just think that, I have a group of individuals in my organization who are looking forward to me retiring because they want my job. And I say to them very clearly, if you want my job, and some of them are bold enough on the onboarding interviews, like, what's your goal and objective? To have your job. Okay, well, let me be pretty prescriptive. You need to hit 6 or 7 of the bases that represent the full scope of things that you'll be responsible for one day. And so we do have a robust program. When I joined the company, it wasn't the case. I have, freaked out our human resources folks because I've got 9 people in Hong Kong right now on expat assignments at every level in the organization. Literally every level. We have expat light programs where we bring people from the Asian offices, Hong Kong in particular, and have them come over here for 3 months. We got a lot of it going this way, but it's about building a culture of a team spirit, and it's all for one and one for all. And secondly, the diversity of experiences that they have is the cultivation of the talent that we think we're going to need in order to be flexible and have a flexible mindset. Because if you've walked in somebody else's shoes, you're likely sympathetic to the problem they're trying to solve. And again, that just leans you into, okay, I'm here to solve the problem. I don't know how I'm going to solve it, but I'm here to try to solve it.
So I first met Peter at a conference, and I had given a presentation on SNOP, and he came up from the back of the room with fire in his eyes, asking me about talent and talent development. He's really got it at his core, so that's great. One more question before we go to, yes, Cindy.
Hi. So I was very impressed with the way you described your technology approach, and I was wondering if you could give us one example of one of these cloud-based solutions and what it's doing for you.
Sure. So we've had an interesting experience with a tool called Anaplan. It's a cloud-based, memory resident database architecture tool. The real layman's description of Anaplan is, it's SQL or Excel on steroids, times 1,000 or whatever. Infinite in every direction, computational power and speed. Infinite, essentially. But your ability, when we were trying to replace one of our shrink-wrapped software applications, it was a $10 million ticket and an 18-month horizon. We sat down with the Anaplan folks and said, listen, this is what we want to do. And in 3 months, through these sprints of development and all the rest, we concept it, we model it, we concept it, we model it. 3 months later, we had the wireframe of a tool up and running. And then 3 months after that, 6 months into it, we had a fully operational model of something that uniquely solved our problem, as opposed to the shrink wrap, which I'd have to adopt our process to work the way it works. So we've been startled. It's sort of funny. I kid with the local Anaplan rep because I think I funded his retirement and his kids' education and the nice car he drives and all the rest.
Thank you, Peter, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing, though. Other parts of our organization have looked over our shoulder and honestly said, what the hell is that? How did you guys get that up and running so fast? How did you get an ROI and a payback calibrated in weeks, not months? I mean, it's literally that startling. There are 4 of these projects now going on with our organization, and we will be retiring traditional shrink-wrapped app after app after app because it's just too damn fast, cheap, flexible, and it does it the way you want to do it.
So real different. Okay, now we're going to bring Keith to the stage. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Love your case study. Thank you.